This is Daniel from the Particular Baptist Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by a friend of the show, Lane Campbell, a trusted mortgage loan originator who helps families just like yours. If you're thinking about buying a home, refinancing, or just exploring your options, Lane will walk with you every step of the way. Lane takes the stress out of the mortgage process so you can focus on what matters most, whether it's using your home equity to get money for home improvements, finding the right loan for your first home, or if you just want to ask some mortgage questions, Lane's heart is to serve. Call or text him at 618-671-1830 and get the mortgage advice you need. That's 618-671-1830. NMLS number 2413537. Edge Home Finance. NMLS number 891464. Equal housing. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Particular Baptist Podcast. I am your host, Daniel Vinson. You can find us on other podcasts at reformpodcast.com. Also, check out our blog at theparticularbaptist.net. And I want to give a shout out to our Petty France Church tier patrons, David, Federal Theology, Sam, Stephen, Kyle. Thank you for your support of our ministry and for being faithful contributors to our mission. If you'd like to join them, there are different tiers you can join and receive different perks. You can do so at patreon.com/the particular Baptist. Great way to support the ministry and get some extra content. All right. We are back in the saddle. So kind of recovering from that first week back to work since the holidays. It's always, I took about 10 days off of leave, and that, you get really comfortable. You don't want to think about work. You don't want to do any of that stuff. And then you have to jump right back into it, and it just hits you really hard, especially when you have to get up at 3:30 in the morning to go to Washington, D.C. from living out in the country. So it hits you hard. So might be a little out of it today as I kind of start to adjust back and everything. And I was sick last week, so I appreciate everyone's patience and those who prayed. Thank you for thinking about me and your support there. It was just a head cold, but it was enough to, I don't feel like doing anything. My voice wasn't great. It's like, let's just take a week off. We can deal with it. But I wanted to, and this might be a bit late at this point, but I think it's still early enough. I wanted to do, we did kind of a Christmas themed episode around the Christmas holiday, around, surrounding the celebration of Christmas. I wanted to do an episode that talked about some principles, thoughts, some theological things that we could look at going into the new year. So this is, I guess, more like a devotional style episode, but I think it might be helpful. Not going to be a long episode today, but just some things maybe that might be good for all of us to consider as we go into the new year, and start thinking about. I don't know if I've really ever been that big into the concept of New Year's resolutions. I think New Year's resolutions can be, it's not necessarily sinful to have New Year's resolutions, but I think people tend to not keep them. They tend to kind of be spur of the moment commitments that don't really end up being commitments. And the common one is always, I think, the gym. People, I'm going to go to the gym in 2026, and then they flunk out once it gets a little too hard. So I've never really been big into that. I think having goals, I think having aspirations is good, but I think they need to be tempered back. I think it's a very worldly way of trying to kind of better yourself without really considering the cost of what you're trying to get into. I think a lot of people they do that spur of the moment, without really thinking through what it is they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it. How do they plan to execute on these these resolutions? How do they, do you have a plan mapped out on how you're going to do it? You're really committed? Do you really want to do it? It doesn't seem like, um, while I'm sure there are those who do follow through on their commitments, there are plenty who don't. So I've never really been big into the New Year's resolution thing, I guess. But I think having, starting off a new year with, um, maybe reflecting on the past year and looking forward from a spiritual perspective, I think can be helpful and see, okay, what are places that I can improve on? What are some things that might be helpful for other brothers, sisters going into the new year? Um, and so I kind of want to touch on some of these things. So let's dive right in here. Number one that's, I think, always important. Sure, it certainly should mark us as Christians, but I think it's one that is commonly misunderstood. Is that we are to walk in true love of our Christian brethren. We're to walk in true love of our Christian brethren. We're to care for their souls. We're to be patient with one another. I think that's something that's easy to forget. I think it's easy to get all fired up about stuff and easy to forget to be patient. But at the same time, we have to be careful not to overemphasize patience, overemphasize being nice, overemphasize being gentle. Right? Those are good. Those are things that we have to do. But we also have to know when to execute the other aspect of love, which is to defend the truth and to stand up for the truth, contend for the truth, as it is said. And that's something that I think in our modern era of understanding what love is acceptance. Typically, love means to tolerate. Love means to not say anything controversial to others. We're all just to get along. We're all just to be in this one big melting pot instead of standing up for the truth and standing up for the scriptures. And sometimes that means you have to call people out. There is a place for that. And I think I may have read this on the show before, but in the First London Baptist Confession of Faith, this is from Particular Baptist Heritage Books. This is the 1646 edition with appendices, and there is an appendix in here called Heart Bleedings for Professors' Abominations. This was a work that was put together by various Particular Baptists, including William Kiffin, who was a signer of the First and Second London Baptist Confession of Faith, addressing really directed towards Quakerism and issues that had come up there. But they were accused of being uncharitable because they were calling people out for their sin and doing so with quite sharp and pointed language. But they have some good points here surrounding that. And what is true love as it relates to our brethren? They say, if any shall judge that we have here declared both favor of uncharitableness, rigidness, censoriousness, and bitterness of spirit to them that dissent from us, we desire all such seriously to take notice that true love and charity is not the soothing of any in their sins, the healing of wounds slightly, the crying of peace, peace, when sudden destruction is at hand. It is not the daubing, smearing with untempered mortar, but it is a true love to the truth and to all for the truth's sake, consisting in plainness and simplicity, engaging us to endeavor the restoring of them that are fallen, to put them as brands out of the fire, to pull them as brands out of the fire, to contend for the faith once delivered to the saints, to not allow such persons that walk disorderly to endeavor the preserving of them that are found in the faith. While some men cry out against us for uncharitableness and crying down sin and sinful practices, oh, how uncharitable in truth are they that can suffer God to be dishonored, his Son to be vilified, his truth trampled underfoot, his ordinances slighted, and their own and thousands of poor souls in danger of being utterly seduced to their own destruction, and yet have not a heart to relent against such practices, nor a tongue to plead against them, whereby others might be forewarned of their swift approaching danger. And the second to last paragraph here, they say, as an ox goeth to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks, till a dart strike through their liver, hasting as birds of the snare, not knowing that it is for their life, and we by uncharitable silence would become guilty of their blood. So they were accused of being uncharitable. They were accused of being non-Christian, basically. You guys are not acting like Christians because you are calling out these sinful things. You're just bitter people. You're just mean, right? And they were saying, and they flipped the tables and said, wait a minute. You guys are actually the mean ones who don't call out these things when it's time to call out them. You let false teaching and sin and wickedness run around in the church among Christians, and you do not have a heart to call out against them. And they're basically saying, how hateful are you that you would ever do that? So, as we think about love for the people of God, it's important to understand that true love is not just in patience, but we are to also be kind. And kindness shows itself in different ways, but kindness can be calling out sin. Kindness can be, sometimes it is a harsh word. It is a sharp word sometimes, because we have to protect the flock, and for that own person's soul too, who is sliding into sin or engaging in those things. It is loving to pull them out. So I'd exhort us to this year, let's have a better understanding of what love means. What is Christian love? Christian love is protecting our brothers and sisters where applicable, and as well as also being patient and gracious and long suffering. There is there's place for those things. We have to have a complete picture of biblical love. Love does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth, right? So that's one. Number two, kind of, I guess, similar to our first point here, we should love our pastors. We should love our pastors. We should have love for all of our elders, but especially for the man of God or men of God, depending on the church, who dedicate their time to teaching us the word, for contending for the truth, for dedicating his entire life and time to watching out for our souls. I think this is something that is lost today in a significant way, that having a proper love for our pastors and a true appreciation for what they do, it is not easy. Pastors don't just preach. They're not just preaching. That's a significant part of what they do, but it's not all that they do. They're also counseling. They're doing visitations. Maybe they're preaching funerals. They're doing weddings. They're dealing with all of the issues, practically speaking, relational issues, sin issues, whatever the case might be, that come up in the church, and they're being pulled in 1,000 different directions. We need to love our pastors. They do a great work for us. They're under a lot of pressure. They have a lot on their plate, because not only do they have to handle all these practical issues that come up in the church and teach the word, God holds them responsible at a high level for how they teach the word, right? James says that those who teach will be held to a greater account. There is a greater responsibility on them, because they have that special role of teaching, preaching the word to the people of God. They guide the church theologically, at least primarily. All elders have a role in this, but the elder who is dedicated to that role of teaching the word of God, expounding upon the scriptures, that is a huge responsibility. So we should be praying for a pastor. That's something I want to be better at this year, especially is praying for my pastor, praying for all of our elders, but especially for a pastor who dedicates his time from his family, from recreations, to teach us the word and watch out for our souls. It is a weighty duty. In particular, Baptists. I titled this episode surrounding something like New Year's from particular Baptists. I wanted to frame these conversations in line with particular Baptist thought. This is the particular Baptist podcast, nonetheless, but still, I wanted to frame this in line with the tradition that we claim to follow. So, we talked about walking in love, quoted from particular Baptists on that. The particular Baptists on the pastoral office were very, very, were very passionate about protecting it, feeding it, providing for it, and did not have nice things to say about those who did not take care of their pastors. It was considered very disrespectful to engage in neglect of your pastor. This is from the General Assembly at 1689. Uh, this was the first General Assembly after the Act of Toleration had been passed. Particular Baptists were able to worship more freely, and so they met in London at this General Assembly, and they had one every year for 5 years, and then the hymn singing controversy completely torpedoed that endeavor. But one of the major topics of discussion at the General Assembly of 1689, of course, adopting the Second London Baptist Confession of Faith, but also talking about providing for pastors, providing for the ministry, and why this is important. One thing that they talked about, you can go and look these up, the minutes from the Baptist assemblies. Jim Renahan has a work that he edited from RBAP. I think you can buy it from Broken Wharf. You probably can, since I think they bought RBAP. But you can, my point is, you can go and look up these minutes, and they talk about this in there. Say, in neglecting to make gospel provision for their maintenance, according to their abilities, which by means many of them are so encumbered with worldly affairs that they are not able to perform the duties of their holy calling in preaching the gospel and watching over their respective flocks. So they're basically saying that in neglecting to make gospel provision for their maintenance, so this means paying for the pastor's salary to be able to, providing for his needs, to be able to focus his time on ministering the word, because these pastors had to be employed through worldly employment in order to survive. But they're saying that they can't do their job as they should if they're not taken care of, right? So that's part of loving your pastor, giving regularly, giving according to your ability to your local biblical church, to support the ministry, support the man of God, loving your pastor, which allows him to be able to minister to your souls so he doesn't have to get a second job to provide for his family, and therefore taking away his attention from doing the work of ministry. So praying for our pastors, providing for our pastors financially, not causing trouble in a local church. That's another way you can love your pastor, right? Being a peacemaker, not being a troublemaker in a local church, not giving your pastor one more thing he has to deal with, right? Not giving him one more problem he's got to resolve because, you were stupid and foolish. So these are all ways we can love our pastors. Number 3, stand fast in the faith. This probably goes without saying, but people seem to be falling all over themselves theologically all the time. So it's something that has to be said again and again and again. In these same minutes where the Baptists were meeting, They had, I guess you could say, somewhat of a benediction, but I think it's encouraging to us here as well. Say, now, brethren, we commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and to give you an inheritance among all of them which are sanctified, praying that you may stand upon your watch, clothed with the whole armor of God, and that you may be kept blameless, living by faith until the coming of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, not casting away your confidence, which hath great recompense of reward. For yet a little while, and he that shall come will come and will not tarry. So it's an encouragement. Stand fast in the faith, keeping watch, keeping the whole armor of God, being watchful for our Lord's coming as Christians. So we stand fast in our faith. We do not move in our faith. We don't turn to the right or to the left. We stand fast. Because really, the devil, the one who wanders by nature, the devil, he's looking for souls to capture. So we have to guard our hearts. Kiffin talked about this as well. This is from his work on Hosea on page 6. He says, why men in an external covenant with God, those that God owns as his, may fall back and degenerate. It is because that men, nay, and they which have more in them than men, even the saints of God themselves, do neglect their spiritual watch. They suffer their spirits to wander, and then it's no marvel that he who wanders up and down the whole earth, seeking whom he may devour, doth meet with this wandering spirit, and turn it out of the way. And so we see David's eye was wandering upon Bathsheba, and Satan soon caught him in a snare. So Kiffin's saying that if you wander in your spirit, it shouldn't be any surprise that the devil, who himself wanders the earth, would find you there and pull you aside from the way. So basically, we need to be watchful. We need to be standing firm. We need to be guarding ourselves. We're going to be perfect? Absolutely not. There's always going to be blind spots, things we're going to struggle with, things we're going to have to fight. There's sin to be repented of. But there will be this stance that we will have, immovable, grounded in Christ's work on the cross, resting in that, utilizing the means of grace that God has given, at least the primary ones, right? We're attending church on the Lord's Day as much as we can. We are reading our Bibles in some way, right? We're studying the scriptures. We're immersed in them. We're fellowshipping with other Christians, right? Partaking of the table on a regular basis. All those things help us to stand firm, to grow, to encourage us so we don't wander. It's easy to wander. And it's all from neglect. That's what Kiffin's saying. We neglect our spiritual watch, right? We're not paying attention. We forget. And we wander off into different ways because we just aren't watching ourselves. We're not keeping our spiritual watch. And so Satan snags us up easily because we're not in the way. We're outside of that realm of protection that God has given us. We're outside of that. And so Satan comes and snags us away, and that's the end of that. To guard ourselves. And then final point here, and this one I guess is kind of in line with some things that have been floating around more and more, I think, in Reformed circles, but not necessarily a very popular one. But we should love our countries as much as it is lovable. And I say that because, of course, there's no country's perfect. But we should be patriotic. We should love those around us with a greater love than the stranger, right? Generally speaking, we are to be good citizens in our countries and stand up for law and order in a land. Particular Baptists were men in their countries and were seeking ways to worship God according to their own consciences, right? Using the system that they grew up in and that they were placed in providentially. And we see multiple particular Baptists, even from the notes of the 1689 Assembly, talking about how it was good that this new king that had come in was seeking, it was good for this new king to stamp out popery and promote the Protestant religion. Those are all good and noble things that we should endeavor to do. So, yes, government can promote true religion, negatively speaking, meaning they can't actively promote it as if, to teach the people that, teach them specific theological truths that are only found in special revelation and that are only for the church to teach. And I'm not going to get into all that. We've talked about that when we talked about Christian nationalism, and Stephen Wolfe and things like that. But there is a sense where a country can promote true religion, We're actually going to, this is in line with next week's episode where I'm going to do a book review of James Bard's King of Kings, and we'll talk about some of these concepts more. But particular Baptists had no problem allowing a government to promote true religion. It was the Anabaptists, primarily at least, who were like, no, we want this absolute religious toleration, absolute religious freedom for everybody, regardless. And particular Baptists said, no, we want toleration in some extent, but there's still some things the government should not allow and some things that the government should promote. So false religion, popery, these were things that were seen as fitting by particular Baptists to deal with, at least in a generally speaking consensus view, right? Grounded in the law of nature, light of nations. We've talked about this. So there was a sense where there was a nationalism that sought to love and promote their way of life, primarily in the betterment of their worship, using the means of their country, and they saw the preservation of their society as being through government promoting true religion. This was necessary for a godly society in their mind, and the stamping out of things that should not be allowed. It's ridiculous to think that particular Baptists thought that, again, from the consensus view at least, that there was this absolute religious toleration. It's ridiculous. And we've debunked that. We've talked about it on the show. We've written about it. We have primary source material where we go through particular Baptist writings and all of these things. So that's said and done. You can go back and listen and read those things. But there was a sense of nationalism that was there among particular Baptists. There was a camaraderie surrounding this, that we should use, that society cannot run in a godly way unless certain things are stamped out and Christianity is promoted by the civil magistrate. So they saw a love for their country, a love for the betterment of their country, a love for worshiping God and wanting to use the system they had to promote that worship and to better their stance in that worship. And I think this too is influenced by men, by William Ames, that great 16th century Puritan who had a tremendous influence on particular Baptists. Jim Renahan, in his commentary on the First London Baptist Confession of Faith, talks about how one of the sources for the First London was William Ames, the Marrow of Theology, which it wasn't called that at the time, but it's the same work. But in that work, Ames talks about orders of loves, all right? And he talks about how we're to love those in kindred and blood more than the stranger, all things being equal. And of course, Ames is giving general principles that are contextual, that are applied contextually, but the general principles remain. Like for him, when you're talking about kindred, you're talking about loving loving those who are kindred in blood, your countrymen, basically, more than the alien or the stranger. And he goes to Romans 9:3, where Paul is calling for a greater special passion or a special dispensation of grace toward his Israelite brethren because they're his countrymen or his kindred according to the flesh. So he has a special bond and a special connection there to them than he does for um, someone in Asia Minor, right? He has a greater love for his brethren because those are his kindred blood brethren. He's conjoined to them in a special way, and that's really where Ames's argument is. We are conjoined to them in a special way. We love people based on how we are conjoined to them providentially. If it's kindred and blood, we have a special love for them. If it's immediate family, we have a special love for them. Believers, we have a special love for them, right? It's contextual and it's going to look different depending on the context, but the general principles are there. And then particular Baptists, this is where they talk about in the 1689 General Assembly. Not everyone there signed it. There was definitely some controversy surrounding it, even among particular Baptists. Doesn't mean they were for absolute religious toleration, but I think some were a little hesitant to to go as far as a lot of these particular Baptists did, which some of those Baptists who did promote this were Kiffin, Keach, and Zernales. Three of those people, at least, were signers of the Second London. But they said, it being our professed judgment, and we on all occasions shall manifest the same to venture our all for the Protestant religion and the liberties of our native country. And we do with great thankfulness to God acknowledge the special goodness to these nations in raising up our present King William to be a blessed instrument in his hand to deliver us from popery and arbitrary power, and shall always, as in duty bound, pray that the Lord may continue him and his royal consort long to be a blessing to these kingdoms, and shall always be ready to the uttermost of our ability in our places to join our hearts and our hands with the rest of our Protestant brethren for the preservation of the Protestant religion and the liberties of the nation. So, very clear language of promoting true religion and wanting popery and other wicked things stamped out by the civil government, and seeing this as a good thing, and wanted this to be long and a prosperous nation. And they saw something as part of that as being the promotion of true religion, and not just any religion, the Protestant religion. They're very specific about that. So let's love our nation. If you're in the U.S., let's be patriotic. Let's love our nation first. Let's seek the promotion of true religion in the appropriate way. Let's do all those things as believers. Let's not stand up for 100-foot Hindu statues out in a field somewhere where people worship demon gods. Why would we want to be in any way in favor of that? We should seek for that to be ended. We should seek the name of Christ to be heard. We should seek the promotion of true religion. All right, so those are just some principles. I hope that's helpful. Some thoughts as we go into the new year that we can, that we can look at and consider as we start to really ramp ourselves back into the new year. I mean, there's people that are, after the holidays, at least in the U.S., people are gone even in January sometimes. I mean, there's people at my work who aren't coming back until like almost the end of January. So we're still in this mindset of positioning ourselves to really start off strong into the new year. So I hope these things are helpful and can give some guidance and some thoughts to consider. This isn't meant to be like some sort of binding legalistic list that says, well, 2026, you have to follow these things, or you're missing some sort of special mark. Or no, these are all biblical concepts, and we need to obey them because they're biblical. But it's not like you check a box and you've made some new stage in Christianity because you've checked the box that the particular Baptist podcast gave you. That's not what I'm trying to encourage at all. But I do hope it helps us to consider things, maybe see places where we need to improve upon, and I know for me, it helps me to um, to to think about things that we need to consider as we go into the year as well. So, anyways, everyone have a great rest of your week. Great episode. Check your DM, brother. Oh, thank you. I appreciate the feedback. I will take a look at your message, sir, and get back to you. But everyone have a great rest of your weekend, and Lord willing, we will be back next week. We're going to be doing a review of James Bard's book, published by Founders, on called King of Kings, and talk about the book and some concepts there and such. So join us next week for that. Looking forward to talking about that. Everyone have a great rest of your weekend. Take care. Thank you for joining the Particular Baptist Podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at The Particular B and subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can find more of our podcast content. Also check out our blog at theparticularbaptist.net. And if you'd like to support our ministry, become a patron today at patreon.com/theparticularbaptist.